Hello, everyone. Welcome to the University of Maine Cooperative Extension's Preserving the Maine Harvest webinar. I'm Kathy Savoy, and I'm joined today by two of my colleagues, Kate McCarty and Lori Bowen. I'd also like to let you know that we have a special guest with us today, and that is our very own Kate McCarty. She is the author of Distilled in Maine, A History of Libations, Temperance, and Craft Spirits. So we're really excited to have her here today with us to bring her knowledge about the topic to today's content, which is drinks from the garden. It's an exciting topic to get us all ready for the 4th of July weekend. Just to let you know, these webinars are designed to provide you with the latest research on the USDA recommendations for safely preserving foods at home. We have corresponded our webinars with the Maine growing cycle so that we can take advantage of what's in season and be able to enjoy it later on in our long winters. Today's topic is discussing making drinks from the garden. We've got a lot of exciting information to bring to you, including using fresh herbs, fruit, vegetables, and even edible flowers in your drinks. We will also be covering how to make shrubs and kombuchas at home. These are two beverages that are a great alternative to alcoholic drinks or to splash into your cocktails. For those of you who are new to our webinar series, we'd like to let you know that we have it set up so that you can hear and see us, but we can't see or hear you as a participant. But we do want to hear your questions, and those can be asked in our Q&A box, which is located at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And we have specific times throughout our webinar when we will be fielding those questions. And if by chance we don't get to your question, we will follow up directly with you via email to answer that question. So thanks so much for joining us. And let's get started with a poll. Remembering that today's topic is all about drinks from the garden, we'd like to hear your response to which of these terms does not relate to beverages. Muddle, Scobie, Shrub, Switchel, Spritz, or brouhaha. So if you could chime in with your response. All right, looks like we've had that up. Well, we got a few folks still chiming in. And we'll end the poll and then share the results. And you can see we will be covering the information regarding muddling, Scobie, Shrub, Switchel, and Spritz today. And you're absolutely right. It is brouhaha. That is a word that is not connected with making drinks from the garden at home. So there are the results again. So I'm really pleased to introduce to you to Kate McCarty, who will again be drawing upon her knowledge as a UMaine Cooperative Extension employee, but also from the work that she has done as the author of her book. Kate?
Thanks, Kathy. So I'm going to cover a number of ways to incorporate homegrown or local produce into your drinks this summer. And we're going to start with juice. So this is a great way to make refreshing summer drinks from your garden, whether you're using them as a mixer for your cocktail, as a non-alcoholic spritzer, or just to start your day with. So some ideas for juice that you can make using Maine fruits and vegetables are, of course, fruit juice, like apple, berry, grape, peach, and pear. Tomato juice, or a tomato, carrot, celery blend, so much like V8, but you get to control the sodium levels. Cucumber juice, and if you like spice, you could add in some jalapenos while you're juicing to make a cucumber jalapeno juice. Beet juice, you can add pickle juice to your dirty martinis. And lately, as we see the rise of locally grown turmeric or ginger, you can source these ingredients locally or even grow them in your own garden to mix into your juices. So if you want to make juice at home, you have a few options. You can use a juicer either an electric one or a steam juicer. So in the picture on your screen there, that's electric on the left and the steam juicer on the right. Or you don't need an appliance to make juice. You can prepare it on the stovetop by heating your fruit and water. So crush the fruit in the saucepan, cover it with boiling water, and then just bring it to a simmer for 10 minutes, and then strain it through either a jelly bag or a double layer of cheesecloth. So that's the quick and dirty way, well, not literally dirty, but the quick way to get fresh juice in your kitchen without one of these expensive appliances. If you make more than you can consume in one sitting, you should pasteurize it, which means to heat to 160 degrees Fahrenheit, and refrigerate it, of course, and then use it within 1 week. If you make a whole lot and you want to preserve it, you can freeze it or can it, and we will include recipes for canning that V8 like tomato blend I mentioned earlier, as well as some other fruit juices in the follow-up resources. So there is some new research on one type of fruit juice, specifically elderberries. Elderberries used to be recommended to be canned just like you would any other berry juice, but new research from the University of Wisconsin actually shows that elderberries don't have a pH low enough to be safely canned using a boiling water bath canner, which was how it was previously recommended to preserve elderberry juice. So now the only recommendation for preserving your elderberry juice is to freeze it. So I mentioned beet juice earlier. I had this great, it was a cocktail at a Maine Spirits event, but you can really easily make it non-alcoholic version. So it's called Soul of the Highlands, and I included the recipe on the next slide here for you. It's fresh lime juice, simple syrup, beet juice, ginger beer, garnished with fresh mint, and then you could add tequila blanco or the clear tequila if you want, if it's happy hour. So it's not happy hour here yet, so I have the non-alcoholic version, and it is absolutely delicious. I'd forgotten, but I think it's important to use that spicy ginger beer to really give it that zing. So again, we'll include this recipe for your home mixology in our follow-up email. So next up, flavored simple syrups. So flavored simple syrups are a great way to maximize the flavor of the ingredients from your garden and get them into your drinks. This picture we have here was made just coincidentally. She just shared the picture with me by Karen Savage, a master food preserver, of a rose simple syrup that she made using her fresh rose petals. So a simple syrup is a syrup that you make from sweetener and water. Typically it's sugar, although you can use honey, agave, sugar in the raw, maple, really any sweetener you prefer. And then adding flavoring is, again, a great way to get that into your drinks. So a rough recipe is to use equal parts sweetener and water. So I've got a cup of water. Typically the 1-to-1 ratio is what you'll find. 1 cup of water. I'm using 1 cup of white sugar. And then to add the flavor ingredients, you'll add in 1/4 of the volume of herbs or fruit. So in this case, I'm doing 1/4 cup of mint. And so I would bring this to a boil, and then just enough to stir to dissolve the sugar. Let it cool, strain it, and that alone is enough to infuse the flavor. So strain the ingredients out, store it in a glass jar in the refrigerator, and try and use it within 1 month. They are prone to molding, so make sure that you get it all used up within a month. You can make a smaller amount if this volume is going to be too much for you. So I would use this mint simple syrup in mojitos, Moscow mules, mint juleps, or daiquiris. You could also use rosemary and use that in a grapefruit juice and gin cocktail. You can make basil simple syrup and pair it with strawberries, peach, raspberry, whatever's in season at that point in the summer, and a splash of bourbon. Berry simple syrup are great just simply mixed with some lemon and lime juice and or the spirit of your choice. Spicy peppers in simple syrup can be used to enliven margaritas. And then if you froze some rhubarb earlier in the season with us, you can use that to make a rhubarb syrup. So any of these flavored simple syrups can be used in a sour. which is a family of cocktails that includes margaritas, mojitos, daiquiris, cosmos. It's a really basic recipe that you can adapt to whatever you have on hand, which is why I love it, especially during quarantine when maybe the pantry got a little thin. So the basic recipe is 2 ounces of alcohol, 3/4 ounce of sour, and 3/4 ounce of simple syrup. So the sour ingredient is typically a citrus juice, and then of course your flavored simple syrup. So again, that's where you get mojitos with rum, margaritas with tequila, cosmos with vodka. I made a French 75 with gin. It's a really great family of drinks to become familiar with and utilize your flavored simple syrups. All right, so next up, muddling, a really simple technique to help get that flavor into your drinks from the garden. So to muddle simply means to smash fruit, herbs, and even vegetables, even in the bottom of your glass or cocktail shaker, and then add your drink ingredients on top. So I have some of them, strawberry and rhubarb, actually frozen from previous webinars. So I let it thaw in the refrigerator. And then I've got this great muddler. So this was specifically bought for the purpose of muddling. But you can use anything you have in your utensil drawer that meets the requirements to be able to help you smash ingredients in the bottom of your glass. So then you'll add your drink ingredients on top. So that could be some alcohol, simple syrup, lemon or lime juice, and then top it all off with ice and seltzer, and you've got a refreshing summer spritzer. And then adding alcohol directly to your flavoring ingredients is another good way to capture the garden's flavor. So simply select your flavoring ingredients, add them to a clean mason jar, cover it with the booze of your choice, and let it stand for a few weeks. So here I have some sour cherry vodka. A friend has a cherry tree. She let me go up on a ladder with a bucket and harvest some last summer, so I had a bunch in my freezer. So I simply filled the quart jar with frozen sour cherries, poured some vodka over the top of it, and let it sit for a few weeks. So this is ready to be strained, and you just strain the cherries out and it's ready to go. You might be tempted to relive some spring break memories and eat the fruit in this process, but actually all the flavor from the fruit has been imparted into the alcohol. So the fruit is going to have very little fruit flavor, but a lot of alcohol flavor. So it might be pretty unpleasant to eat the fruit. So what I like to do with this is to enjoy it with lime juice, a little simple syrup, and seltzer, and it tastes like cherry limeade. So other great combinations for flavoring alcohol are apples and peaches in bourbon, hot peppers, celery, and dill in vodka for Bloody Marys, cranberry lime vodka, and believe it or not, banana whiskey. So I know that's not local, but I just had it for the first time, and you really have to try it to believe it. Okay, next up, shrubs. So shrubs are a mixture of fruit, sugar, and vinegar. And this drink has its roots in colonial New England, when vinegar was more common than lemons and limes, and was used to preserve foods and give them some zing. So rural New Englanders used to drink shrubs and switchels as a sort of Gatorade to refresh them while working in the fields. The infusion of the fruit into the vinegar with sugar helped to preserve the flavor and then capture that fleeting harvest. Today, they're not only a tasty drink, but a good way to clean out any fruit from last year's harvest that you may have in the freezer. So make sure you start with high quality fruit. It doesn't have to be prime, but it shouldn't be overripe or have any mold on it. And to prevent spoilage, you should begin by sterilizing your jar by boiling it in water for 10 minutes. So the basic recipe for a shrub is equal parts fruit and sugar, and then you can also add any complementary herbs. Let the mixture sit refrigerated for a few days, shaking it or mashing it every day, and then strain it and add equal parts vinegar of 5% acidity. So this shrub that I began a few days ago is peach and basil. So it's equal parts a peach compote that I had in my freezer, which was just peaches cooked with water until they were kind of stewed, and I froze it with about 5 leaves of basil and an equal part of sugar. So this has been sitting, And because I started with a compote rather than chunks of sugar, I think what I'm going to do is just add a little less than an equal amount of vinegar directly to it. Because I thought about straining it earlier, and there really wasn't much distinction between the liquid and the solids. So I'm going to add the vinegar right to the fruit and sugar mixture. Let that sit for a while. And then you can see it'll be much easier to strain. And you can play around with the ratio. If you're somebody who's thinking, I don't know about drinking vinegar, you can add less vinegar. So really it's up to you. It does not need to be equal parts vinegar, fruit, and sugar. You can reduce the vinegar until it's to your liking. So now this is what I would strain. One great tool for using in the kitchen is this fine mesh little strainer sieve to really help you strain out. So your flavored simple syrups, your shrubs will help you a lot with that. Excuse me. So I made a little ahead of time. I've got some of my finished shrub here. And you know, looking at it, I'm like, I actually might like that. It has those peach solids in it still because they're not real chunky. They're nice and distributed. So I might just take the big basil leaves out and call that a finished product. But I've got a little bit of shrub over ice. And then, you know, on a hot day, you can just enjoy it with some seltzer. But the important thing is to make sure that you keep your shrub refrigerated at all parts of the process. So some other ideas for flavor combinations throughout the summer include strawberry rhubarb, peach basil, and then blueberry herbs, so thyme, rosemary, basil. Later in the fall, you can do apple, cranberry. And when I didn't mention the vinegar, you can use whatever kind of vinegar you want, as long as it's a 5% acidity, knowing that the different flavored vinegars will, of course, impart a different flavor to your shrub, but you can consider that when you're selecting your flavor combinations. All right, that's it for now.
Hey, thanks so much, Kate. We're gonna jump into a poll and ask you a question, testing your knowledge on shrubs. So we'll wait for that question to come up. And all of the following are best practices for making shrubs except. So we'll give you a few minutes to select your answer. And if you haven't had a chance yet, go ahead and enter your answer there. And we'll end the poll and share those results. And yes, indeed, it looks like the majority of you were able to identify that sterilizing the jars is a best practice, keeping the shrub refrigerated is a best practice, using high quality fruit is a best practice, and using vinegar at 5% acidity is a best practice. And the thing that is not a best practice is letting the fruit stand on the countertop or at room temperature while you are making your shrubs. And that has to do with, you know, food safety issue of keeping things at room temperature, particularly in the summertime, and we may have some molds or unfavorable things form, and we really want to avoid that. So thanks so much. We are going to get started with our first Q&A session. So we've got a few questions in the box, and we'd like to have Lori join us to ask those questions.
Okay. Our first question is, in regards to the simple syrup, can fruit juices be used in place of the water or sweetener?
Yes, so you can use fruit juice in place of water or sweetener. I was going to say in place of the flavoring ingredients. So you can add fruit juice to flavor it, but to make a simple syrup, you stick with the 1-to-1 ratio, typically of sugar and water, and then introduce flavorings in the form of fruit, vegetable, herbs, dried spices, and fruit juices. So that's where I would see the role of fruit juice in the simple syrup.
Okay. Can you show the muddling tool again?
Ooh, yes. And I want to say that I was like, where did I get this? I want to say if you are interested in any sort of home bartending and you're in Maine, in the Portland area, there's a great shop in Portland called Fiz House. It's started out as a soda bar. They got their liquor license, so they are a full-fledged bar now, but they have a great selection of retail stuff for home bartenders, both new and vintage. So this is just like a molded plastic stick, but it's got these like ridges on the end that really help you mash your muddling ingredients. I'm sure you can order them online as well.
What % of alcohol should be used?
I guess in what?
Well, it did not specify.
Percent of alcohol. So, I mean, alcohol itself as a distilled spirit has a percentage, typically 40% to 50% alcohol, right? It's half of the proof. So whatever proof your alcohol is, if you divide it in half, that's the percentage of alcohol in that particular spirit. And you might see some recommendations. So if you're infusing alcohol, to use like an Everclear or an overproof alcohol, but I recommend using something that you want to drink because that's ultimately what you're going to do with it. So a higher percentage of alcohol will pull the flavor out faster, but might give you kind of those harsh flavors that come with a higher alcohol content. I just used like a mid-range vodka. I think I spent about $12 for the 750. So something I would drink in a cocktail to infuse my cherries in.
Okay, and we did get clarification on that. It was the % in regards to soaking the fruit, so.
Oh. Yeah, so just your typical full strength alcohol, would be like 80 to 90 proof, so 40 to 45% alcohol.
Okay. Did you mention an option or a recipe for tomato shrubs?
I did not. What do you think about a tomato shrub, Kathy?
I don't really think it would tickle my taste buds. I feel like there's too much going on there between the vinegar and then the tomato and of course the sweetener. But hey, I don't know. It might be something we need to try in our test kitchen, Kate.
I do love tomato jam, and it could be along those lines of that sweet savory. So
yep, and I was surprised by how much I liked that as well.
Yeah.
Savory tomato jam.
Okay. Are there special considerations that need to be made for a sugar substitutes such as monk fruit or stevia?
I bet there are, but I personally am not all that well versed in sugar substitute. And that did pop into my mind as something I should look up before the webinar, but didn't quite get to it. So what we'll do is we'll do some research and follow up with you over email.
Okay.
And Truvia is the commercial brand of stevia that you can, it's widely available in grocery stores, and that can be substituted 1-for-1 with your sugars.
And they do sell those like in liquid form already, so I'm sure you could make it at home.
Okay. I think we have time to sneak one last question in the Q&A box in. You named a few types of strainers. What are the varieties of strainers?
Yeah, so the one we recommend for like your shrubs and simple syrup where you have like chunkier ingredients that you're straining the liquid from. This is just a fine mesh sieve. And they come in all different sizes, so it's smaller than your colander with holes in it. So a wire mesh. But you can also get what's called a jelly bag. So it's used in jelly making to separate the liquid from the solids. So you cook the fruit with water, put it into the jelly bag. It's literally just a cotton or muslin bag. And then it comes with a contraption that's a ring on legs that you put the bag over to pour the fruit in and let it drip into your bowl or container to get the juice for jelly making. So you can use that just to make fruit juice for drinking, as well as just using double layer of cheesecloth to get that fine mesh that will strain the solids from the liquid.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks so much. And we will have another Q&A session later on in the webinar. For now, we're going to switch gears and talk a little bit about kombucha, and then we've got a little movie to show you to demonstrate how to make kombucha. But kombucha is in fact a wildly popular drink. It is fermented fizzy tea. It's a beverage and it has both an acidic taste and a mild sweetness. And this beverage has been around for a long time. There are lots of health claims that have been made about the benefits of drinking kombucha, but all of these claims still need more research. The distinctive flavors of kombucha are a result of fermentation of the sugared black tea with what's called a Scobie, which is a symbiotic culture of bacteria and yeast. Got a great picture coming up in the video that will show you a Scobie. A fresh Scobie can be purchased online as part of a starter kit, but it can also be grown from a commercial bottle of raw, unflavored kombucha. Or if you know someone who is brewing kombucha at home, you can get a layer of their mother Scobie. You can peel that off and you can use that to get started on your kombucha making adventure. So now for the video. And we'll take a minute to get that up. So here are some of the safe guidelines for making kombucha at home. So to make about 1 gallon of kombucha, you're going to boil 3.5 quarts of water for 1 minute, remove it from the heat, and stir in just 1 cup of sugar. Add 8 black tea bags, and let that steep for about 10 minutes. And then you remove the tea bags and let the tea base cool to room temperature. And here's that Scobie. And once you have your cooled tea base, you combine that with the Scobie and 2 cups of the starter kombucha liquid from a previous batch. And you combine all of those things with your tea base in a glass container. The addition of the 2 cups of starter liquid is important because it helps to rapidly reduce the pH of the mixture. This is an important step because it will help prevent microbial contamination. You want to cover your kombucha with a coffee filter secured with a rubber band to prevent cross-contamination. And then you let it ferment for 7 to 10 days at 72 to 84 degrees. Here are some photos that show the changes over time as the tea ferments. The Scobie may sink, it may float. Either is fine, it is not a safety issue. You'll start to see a new creamy colored layer of the Scobie form on the surface of the kombucha within a few days. You may see darkish, brown, stringy strands floating beneath the Scobie, as well as sediment on the bottom. These are all signs of a normal fermentation, and it's nothing to worry about. The final pH of your fermented kombucha is 2.5. And once it's done, you can remove the Scobie and you can drink it as is, or you can flavor it with a second ferment. And here again are opportunities to infuse your kombucha with juice, herbs, fruit. You want to allow these jars to ferment for another 24 to 48 hours and then strain out the fruit that you may have added. And then you store it in the refrigerator and enjoy it. There are recommendations for consumption of kombucha, which may be a surprise to a lot of people. And these are based on some research that's been done, but the recommendation is a 1/2 cup of kombucha per day. So I realized that that was a lot of information, and that if you are in fact interested in learning how to make kombucha at home, rest assured that we will provide additional information to you. We have a fact sheet from our colleagues in Colorado that covers the history, the safety, and steps to make your own kombucha at home. I've also located a research article from one of my favorite professional journals that, for those of you who are interested, will take you on a deeper dive into the science and also the safety of making kombucha. So let's turn to our second poll for today's webinar. And the question we'd like you all to respond to now is having to do with making kombucha at home. So what are the signs of spoilage when making kombucha? So is it a floating SCOBY? Is it a sinking SCOBY? Could it be those dark floating strands? Is it mold or is it sediment? So again, take a second to respond. And we will go ahead and end that poll. We've had quite a few people respond, and here are the results. And indeed, you were listening. Thank you all for being a good listener. Mold is something that we don't want to see on our kombucha fermenting at home. But it is absolutely normal to see your SCOBY sink when you add it to your tea base, and then to see it float just a few days after and combine with the newly forming SCOBY at the top of your kombucha. It's very natural to see sediment form on the bottom of your jar, and it is normal to see some dark strands that may float on the underside of the SCOBY. Those are all normal things. And again, we know that that was a lot of information, so look for those resources that will cover in detail more information about safely making kombucha at home. So we're going to turn it back over to Kate and talk about some garnishes, some fun garnishes for the drinks from the garden.
Thanks, Kathy. I have to say, I'm down here drinking your strawberry kombucha, and it's delicious.
Good to know.
So yes, once you've got your drink made, you can turn to the garden for some finishing flair for your mocktails and cocktails. So you can use dried fruits as a garnish. So here in Maine, you could use strawberry, pear, peach, or apple, and you can make those using an electric dehydrator. We will go into depth on drying fruits on September 29th, so you can learn all about it then. So dried fruits as a garnish is a great way to enliven your drinks. You can also mix herbs and dried citrus zest together into salt and sugars for rimming your glasses. So you can mix chopped herbs, dried fruit, flowers, dried chilies, and or citrus zest into salt and sugar to use on margaritas, palomas, or non-alcoholic spritz. So Kathy made this one. It is a cayenne and lime zest sugar rim. So then this is a really easy trick to elevate your drinks at home. You take a cut lime, or I actually just use some bottled lime juice and squeeze it into a dish, turn my glass upside down to get it wet around the rim, and then I've got the sugar or salt, whatever you're using, on a plate here, and you just dance your glass around in it until it's all evenly stuck on the outside. You can do it just on one side if you want to take sips that don't have the salt or sugar on it. You can alternate between using the rim or just avoiding it, which I kind of like. And then you can get fancy with your ice. So this is just a silicone ice cube tray that then makes large ice cubes, which I think just automatically look more fancy. And to it, you can freeze herbs, fruit, edible flowers in this ice tray. So if you want your ingredients to show up, you can use distilled water. So if you just use tap water, you can see mine's a little cloudy. Let me make sure you can see that. Hold on. Okay. So you can see mine's a little cloudy, which might cover up the ingredients you add. So if you are really going to go to great lengths, you'll need to purchase distilled water to get crystal clear ice cubes. So I used mint leaves and then some little tiny purple flowers from my thyme, which are absolutely adorable. So you can use other edible flowers like elderberry, other herb flowers, violets, nasturtiums, the thyme, rosemary, basil, mint flowers, all in your ice cubes. And then of course, fruit like berries or cut up citrus wheels. Let me look around and make sure I covered everything. I got a lot of stuff over here for you. I think that's it. So with that, we will turn to Lori for some more questions.
Okay, we have some good questions. The first question, do you use the steam juicer? I've been considering one and unsure how useful. I have loads of fruit from my garden.
I'm happy to answer that one. Kate, feel free to chime in as well. We were gifted the steam juicer here at our office, and we have actually not used it much. I believe that I would use it more if I had access to more fresh fruit that would be something that I would want to juice. Grapes are something that I think of that are great for juicing. I just don't have access to a lot of fresh grapes. Kate, have you used it much?
I haven't, but I will say that we did have a master food preserver volunteer borrow it because she is really into permaculture and has an incredible edible landscape in her yard. So she used it to make grape juice and loved it. And they're not expensive. Well, I think they're not that expensive.
No, and they are easy to use.
Yeah.
Okay. How do you know when it's time for a new SCOBY?
Okay, so your SCOBY, if it starts to take on an odor, something that is, really a strong, sometimes described as a putrid odor, it is time to dispose of that. Also, if it develops any mold, it is time to get rid of that and start a new one. But again, I just want to emphasize that those dark strands that may form, those are not an indication that you need to have a new SCOBY.
All right. And do you have a recommendation for where you should purchase SCOBY from?
So I have been fortunate in being able to acquire a SCOBY from someone who has an active kombucha fermenting process going on. I have not ordered one via an online source. I know that Kate, and hopefully she can chime in here, has had experience making one from kombucha that she purchased at the store.
Yes. I don't have the recipe memorized off the top of my head, but it's basically like you're making kombucha, so same ingredients, but with a different ratio. So I started with a 16-ounce bottle of a commercial brand, again, of the plain. So if you have the flavoring ingredients might mess up the fermentation. So just get the plain. And then you make a concentrate of black tea and sugar and let it cool, because if you add the hot liquid to your kombucha, it would kill the bacteria. And then mix them together and let them stand in a sterilized quart jar, and a SCOBY should form on the surface of that. And then you can use that SCOBY as well as the starter liquid to start your next batch. So you can start it from something you can buy at the store, which is nice.
Yep.
Something from nothing.
What do you mean by the recommendation of half a cup of kombucha a day? Like no more than half a cup or at least half a cup? And is this a health recommendation?
So it is a surprise to a lot of people, for sure. And this is based on the information from the research article, which we will share with you in our follow-up resources. It is, in fact, recommending no more than a half a cup of kombucha being consumed per day. And that has to do with the concern around some of the food safety issues related to making kombucha at home. And you'll find in the research article that it does advise people to, pay close attention to their own gut response to consuming kombucha, and then adjust accordingly.
Okay. Do you have to use tea? What about green tea, decaf tea, or herb tea?
Yep. So, as people advance in their skills around making kombucha, people do like to try different types of teas. The recommendation for kombucha is black tea. If you begin to explore the world of fermented tea beverages, you will find that when you ferment green tea, and this is usually done with honey as well, not sugar, it's called jun. So that is a different type of fermented beverage. One of the issues associated with using a flavored tea as your tea base is that your SCOBY will take on those flavors, and then that flavor will continue to be imparted in future batches of kombucha. So I recommend that you do the second step and flavor after you're done with your black tea base fermenting.
Thank you. When flavoring alcohol with fruit, is this something I can leave out on the counter like you see at bars, or must it be refrigerated?
Yeah, we would recommend that you refrigerate that product, both as you're infusing the fruit and then after you've strained the fruit, keep the product in the fridge. And that's because there is going to remain some fruit, I won't say solids because they're not solid, but some fruit matter in your alcohol. And so there could potentially be the risk for mold. I do also see them left out at bars, but there are a lot of things left out on bars that are not in line with food safety recommendations. So make sure you keep it in the refrigerator, and then it'll be nice and cold for your drink.
I think we might have time for one last question. How long should the SCOBY starter sit when you are trying to grow a SCOBY? Room temperature or in a refrigerator?
So that you should let that sit for about a week. That's when it should be fully grown and be able to be used in your next batch of kombucha. And you want to let it sit out at the same temperature that you ferment kombucha at. What is that exactly, Kathy? Like a cool room temperature, 55 to 70?
For fermenting?
Yeah.
Yep. Those temperatures were in the 70s, not to exceed 84.
Yep. Same as fermenting the kombucha to grow your SCOBY.
Yep. Great. Well, thanks for all those questions. Again, if there are any left unanswered, we will get back in touch with you via an email from our UMaine staff, and that will be Lisa Fishman, who you'll receive an email from. So we want to put the slide up that shows the recommended resources that you will be receiving after today's webinar. And again, we've mentioned these as we've gone along, and some of them are right from our UMaine publications, but also some of them we draw upon from our colleagues throughout the country. And then of course, we always have our USDA and National Center for Home Food Preservation Education recommendations. So these are going to be shared with you after the webinar. Kate?
So we've also, along with this webinar series, started a new Preserving Coach program. So if you are new to preserving and you're here in Maine, you are eligible to be paired with one of our trained Master Food Preserver volunteers. So these volunteers are trained by Kathy in all aspects of home food preservation and then volunteer in the community teaching food preservation education. So they are looking for things to do, as you can imagine, as community events have been canceled, but certainly preserving has not been. So we've started this virtual volunteering Preserving Coach program. We've had 3 takers so far, and we still have plenty of interested Master Food Preserver volunteers waiting to be paired up with a newbie preserver. So if you are a Maine resident and are interested in receiving preserving advice from a trained volunteer, you can email me. My email address is on the screen there, and I'll be emailing you after the webinar, so you can just respond directly to me. So we'll be back next week with a new topic. Tuesday at 2 p.m., we're going to be teaching you how to make quick pack cucumber pickles. Other topics for next month include fermenting cucumber pickles, canning and freezing green beans, and freezing Maine seafood. That one will have a special guest speaker. And we'll share in our follow-up email upcoming registrations, resources, and recipes from today's topic, and information on how to be paired with a preserving coach. We'll also share with you a link to complete an evaluation and a certificate of completion. You can also give us your US mailing address if you're interested in receiving a free headspace measuring tool, which is something that you use when you're canning. All right, so thank you all so much for joining us. I hope you all have a safe, happy holiday weekend with a lot of delicious drinks.
Thanks everyone for joining us. We hope to see you next week.